Let me repeat. Development of the digestive system, and we should start from the development of the facial development. Facial development begins at the end of the first beginning of the second month of the embryogenesis. First, at the side, what happened at the first? At the side of the future oral cavity, it's a deepening of the ectoderm. It forms the stomadeum. Stomadeum, you can see here the oral fissure. It's easy to understand on this picture. So oral or mouth slit or stomadeum or primary oral cavity. This deepening is limited to a few protrusions. On top of frontal process, you can see here, in which there are two olfactory fossa. These pits are limited by rollers, medial and lateral nasal processes. Below, excuse me, a lot of students try to enter. Below the stomadeum is bounded by the first gill arch, which is later divided into the paired mandibular and maxillary processes. And paired mandibular processes, maxillary processes will give rise to the maxilla, and mandibular processes fuse together to create mandibula. Gap is formed between the lateral nasal processes and the maxillary processes, the nasolacrimal groove, and which later transforms into the nasolacrimal canal. Nasolacrimal groove will modify it into the nasolacrimal canal. A triangular field is formed between the middle nasal processes. At the 6th week of the embryogenesis, the middle nasal processes grew together with the maxillary processes, resulting in the formation of apogee. And convergence and fusion of mandibular processes leads to the formation of the mandibule. Development of the hard palate. So here you can see next step of formation is the formation of the maxilla, complete maxilla, mandibule. That's modification of the nasolacrimal groove into the nasolacrimal canal, which is located inside, and formation of primary eyes. It's a frontal process. It's a middle nasal process. So let's go to the formation of the hard palate. At the end of the second month, palatal processes are formed on the inner surface of the maxillary processes. Initially, the processes are directed downward and lay on the both sides of the tongue. Then the volume of the oral cavity increases, the tongue lowers, and the head of the palatine processes grow. At the same time, the hard palate, which divides the stomadeum into oral and nasal cavity, is formed. Here you can see the palatine processes fuse together with primary palate, so it's created by fusion of three sources. It's this part of maxillary process. They fuse together with formation of the hard palate. Here we see primary tongue. Development of the nose. And here you can see next step of formation of the hard palate with formation of the nasal cavity, nasal septum. And last one, it's the complete formation, finish of formation of the hard palate. Formation of the nose. The nasal septum is formed from the middle and nasal processes. The lateral nasal processes form the wings of the nose, and the back of the nose is formed from the triangular field. If you remember, this triangular field is located between maxillary processes. The olfactory fossa deepen and transforms into primary cones. The next step is the formation of the tongue. Tongue formation, let me remind you where the primary tongue is located, is here. The tongue develops from the first, second, and third pharyngeal arches as a result of the fusion of the 5 rudiment, 2 pairs which originate from the first pharyngeal arch. They form the epithelium of the mucous membrane of the body and the tip of the tongue. And they add lingual tubercle, which is a form between the third pharyngeal arch. Here you can see this tubercle. It forms the diamond-shaped part of the back in front of the Ralph's nipples. And the thickening of the second and third pharyngeal arches forms the root of the tongue. The epithelium of the tongue differentiates at the 7 weeks. At the 8 and 9 weeks, fundiform papilla are formed. The filiform papilla, which covers the surface of the frontal 2/3 of the tongue, anterior 2/3, appear around the 10th week of the development. The muscles of the tongue develop from the myotomes of the cervical somites. If you remember the basic structure of the tongue, skeletal muscles, so they develop from the cervical somites. Next step, pharyngeal apparatus of the embryo. Pharyngeal apparatus, look here. At the beginning of the second month, on both sides of the pharynx, symmetrically appear 5 protrusions of the endoderm pharyngeal pockets are formed. Toward it, 5 cells of an ectoderm pharyngeal creeks are formed. In the place of contact of pharyngeal pockets and pharyngeal fissures, pharyngeal membranes are formed. Here you can see pouches, arches, and cleft of fissures. So sources of development of the pouches is the endoderm, fissures, ectoderm, and between them take place mesoderm. Between the pharyngeal pockets and slits grows mesenchyme, the branches of blood vessels and nerves grow, and pharyngeal arches are formed. What about differentiation? What about differentiation of these sources? Let me switch. Pharyngeal fissures. First pharyngeal fissure transformed into external auditory canal, and all others are reduced. And next, the pharyngeal membranes. First pharyngeal membrane transforms into tympanic membrane. Others are reduced. It's simple about pharyngeal fissures and pharyngeal membrane. What about pharyngeal pockets? Pharyngeal pockets. First pharyngeal pocket becomes the epithelium of the tympanic cavity. So will give rise to the epithelium of the middle ear. Second pharyngeal pocket in the will transform into the epithelium of crypt of the tonsils. If you remember, tonsils which create Pyrgo-Valdeir ring in the pharynx. we have 6 tonsils. They have crypt-like evagination, so epithelium of crypt made up of second pharyngeal pockets. Third and fourth pharyngeal pockets transform into the thymus and thyroid gland. So you must remember the thymus and thyroid glands originate from the pharyngeal pockets, which are third and fourth. 5 pharyngeal pocket. 5 pharyngeal pocket must explain you. 5 pharyngeal pocket will modify it into ultimobranchial body. It's very interesting structure. It's composed of C cells, which come here from the neural crest. If you remember stages of neurulation, this formation of neural crest from both sides of the primary central nervous system, and this neural crest will create endocrine isolated endocrine cells, which compose 4 groups of the endocrine system, which are like output system cells. So C cells, which migrated from neural crest, compose ultimobranchial body as together with 4 pharyngeal pocket. And after that, after formation, they will migrate to the thyroid gland, which very close here, and will produce calcitonin. Next, source embryonic source pharyngeal arches. First pharyngeal arch provides the formation of the upper and lower jaw processes, and masticatory muscles and auditory ossicles at the malleus origin from the first pharyngeal arch. Second pharyngeal arch provides the formation of the uncus, stapes, and some part of the hyoid bone and facial muscles. So you must remember the masticatory muscles, which are musculus temporalis, musculus masseter, musculus pterygoideus, lateralis and medialis. They are masticatory muscles origin from the first pharyngeal arch, and all of the facial muscles origin from the second pharyngeal arch. Third pharyngeal arch provide formation of sublingual bone and some cartilage of the larynx. Fourth pharyngeal arch provides the formation of cartilage and muscles of the larynx. The muscles of the larynx is located above the vocal plexus. And fifth pharyngeal arch is reduced. So next step is the formation of salivary glands. Formation of salivary glands. Let me explain you here. Salivary glands are located. The development of salivary glands begins with the rapid proliferation of epitheliocyte of oral fossa and the ingrowth of epithelial cord into the ectomesenchyma. The central cells of epithelial cords are killed by apoptosis. This is how the duct system is formed. Part of epithelial cells differentiate into myoepithelial cells, which are localized outside the secretory cells of the terminal division of duct. A capsule and septa are formed from the adjacent ectomesenchyma. The parotid gland begin to develop at 4 weeks, the submandibular glands at 6 weeks, and the sublingual and small salivary glands at 8 and 12 weeks. of the embryogenesis. So at the first happened formation of duct. After that, myoepithelial cells. And only after that, finish formation of secretory cells. If you remember, secretory cells of salivary glands can be two types of cells, serous and mucous cells. Next, here you can see malformation of differentiation and embryogenesis of salivary glands. The next step is the formation of thyroid glands. Development of thyroid glands is very close, go together with formation of the tongue. Development begins at the 3rd and 4th weeks of embryogenesis with a dense protrusion of epithelium of the pharyngeal floor between 1st and 2nd pairs of pharyngeal pockets. The beginning of the gland grows downward, forming an epithelial coat with a thickening end at the end. Derivatives of endoderm cells are follicular cells, which are thyrocytes of the thyroid glands. So we origin from the endoderm. From the 3rd month of embryogenesis, follicles are formed, and between which the mesenchyme grows and differentiates. Over time, the cord that connects the thyroid glands to the pharynx, thyroid lingual duct, is reduced, leaving only a blind hole in the middle of the terminal groove of the tongue. If you remember, this terminal groove